Welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast. I'm Ani Anderson.
And I'm Brian Trzaskos. Join us as we explore the science
and art of trauma-sensitive somatic practices and tools.
Strengthen your practice as a coach, therapist, or holistic professional.
Master the art of motivating even the most challenging clients when you understand how to tap into and unlock your client's complete holistic intelligence.
If you want to learn the most cutting-edge, research-supported skills for personal and professional mastery, you've come to the right place. Let's get this conversation started.
Hi, and welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast. Hey, Brian.
Hello, Ani.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to hear all the things you have to say this week because I know we're talking. I know what we're talking about this week.
Yes, that's right. Yes, right.
I'm just going to sit back and let you just talk.
Yeah. So a few weeks ago, we did an episode on occupational therapists. And,
is it a match?
And is it a match? And the physical therapist got a little like, hey, what about us?
The OTs were really excited about it.
They were really excited.
It made me really happy to deliver that podcast to the OTs in the community and be like, look at what we did for you.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes the occupational therapists are outshined by the physical therapists.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
All right. It's
so this week, we're talking about physical therapists and somatic coaching. Is it a match? Ding. All right, so let's talk about this. So what do you want to know?
What would you like to say? So actually, we should just back up here for a second because not everybody who's listening has heard us talk before. So hi there. I'm Ani, and I am an occupational therapist by training. I have my master's degree, my bachelor's and master's degree in occupational therapy, and I worked in the Western medical system for about 5 years before I said, hell no, get me out of here. And you have your degree in physical therapy.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about your background, Brian, so people who don't know you can understand where you're coming from.
Sure. So I graduated with a bachelor's in PT. So I'm an old man.
You're that old.
I'm that old.
Didn't have to get a doctorate.
I was one of the last classes. Yeah. That was like nationally recognized as a bachelor's. I think I was the second to last class. So I have a bachelor's. So I've been a PT for 31 years now at this point. I think going on 32 years. I've had that long, and I've worked in the Western medical system. I was trying to think of what you said for about 16 years. Yeah, 16 years. So it's actually kind of cool. Like I have now worked professionally as long outside of the Western medical system that I did inside it.
Congratulations.
So it's kind of like feels like a real
exciting
thing now.
Yeah.
You know, when you leave working for internally, like as an employee, and you start your own job, what I felt like is this real? Can I really pull this off? Can I really do it? Is it really happening?
Yeah.
And now I'm like,
I did it. Like,
it's like, oh my God, I'm actually almost as long not in the Western system as I've had my own business for as long as I worked internally. It's kind of like interesting to kind of think about that. I'm like, wow, I think I maybe did it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and you still have to kind of work at it and all that kind of stuff, but
I get it. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur for longer than you, but there's still like, I think I'm finally to the place where I don't feel like I'm constantly flying by the seat of my pants. And I feel like a big girl now.
Yeah.
So I can relate. And you worked as a physical therapist in some really cool places too.
Yeah. So one of my very first, my very, very, very first job, I worked at the Buffalo General Hospital, kind of like in acute care and outpatient orthopedics. And I wasn't there for even a year because I got a job offer to go back to Craig Hospital where I did an internship. So I worked at Craig for just around 8 years, a little over 8 years.
And that's a world-class
world-class hospital on neurological rehabilitation. So I worked primarily with people recovering from traumatic brain injury. I had the great honor of working with some of the Columbine survivors, Columbine shooting survivors at the time when I was there. So there's a lot going on at Craig when I was there. I went back not recently now, this is pre-pandemic. So maybe like 2019, I went back and I taught a workshop at Craig. and it was completely different and just amazing. I mean, they're just doing incredible things there.
Yeah.
So I learned so much about being there. One of the things I learned about being there was the whole idea of inter and interdisciplinary care and
Right.
like how to work with other disciplines and learn from other disciplines to not really be siloed as a physical therapist. And a lot of that really informed my thinking, my feeling, my becoming more of a holistic practitioner, right?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm listening and thinking, I'm actually interested to hear what you have to say about somatic coaching and physical therapy isn't a match because I think one of the reasons it's been a match for you is because of your experience working interdisciplinary and because you've kind of been a closet OT too, like in the way that you think, and the way that you treat and the way that you approach clients and stuff like that. So I'm really interested to see what you have to say.
Well, yeah, but I think I became more of a closet OT after I worked at Craig. I
Yeah,
don't, I didn't certainly when I went into that role, I wasn't at all. I mean, I was pretty hardcore PT, evidence-based, um, following the science, all the things that PTs like to say. Like you got to prove
I was
it
gonna
to me,
say, what are you? Yeah, you got to prove it to me.
right?
What are you trying to insinuate? But yeah,
You know,
PTs can really get like
yeah,
that.
pretty hardcore
Yeah,
in terms of that. Show it to me, and I still kind of feel that way
I
in a
was
lot
gonna
of
say
ways.
you still are Mr.
but I've
Science
but
Guy.
I've broadened but here's the change. Here's the change now. Where it used to be, I used to use that as a defense to kick out things that I didn't want to believe were true,
Okay.
right? I'm evidence-based, which means I would kick out things that I didn't want to believe were true. And now I use it as a way to be inclusive, to basically rule out things that aren't true at all.
What?
So think about this. So now I seek evidence. I
Okay.
seek evidence not to confirm what I already believe. I
Hmm.
seek evidence to prove things outside of my current knowledge state.
Okay, that makes
So
sense.
maybe, hopefully,
Yeah,
maybe
that
that
makes
makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah,
So I'm using that same idea now to broaden my perspective rather than narrow my perspective,
mhm,
because you can use that argument for either way,
sure,
right?
sure.
And
And
so
science is always changing.
it's always changing, it's always evolving. And if you look back over time, about this is a whole other podcast too, right? That as science has changed, in the early 1900s, we didn't even know that the heart was electrical.
We didn't know we had a body.
Yeah, we didn't know the heart was electrical. And so,
Right.
not until Einthoven created the EKG did we actually did, and he proved it, that we go, oh, maybe the heart's electrical. And now think about all the medical technologies that's been created just based on that one discovery alone.
Yeah.
But before that, it was like the world was flat.
Hmm.
And nobody would even touch it with a 10-foot pole because they thought you were crazy for even thinking about those things. So, science continues to evolve. And that's what I'm saying by using the evidence to broaden perspective rather than narrow perspective.
Well, to broaden perspective versus narrowing perspective, I think from a physical therapy point of view is potentially interesting because the physical therapist can be very hyper focused on body, body, body.
Well, think about it. We're physical therapists,
Right.
right? So just the name alone like tells you where we're going to focus and where we're being taught to focus and where we're being trained to focus is on the physical
Right.
reality of someone.
Okay, so super makes sense. And let's just acknowledge the fact, of course, that the mind is the body
Yeah.
and that emotions have something to do with how we feel and that pain is primarily perceptual.
Yeah.
Like, what about all that stuff? And I think when we talk to physical therapists, actually you do a lot of training still with physical therapists. When you bring up some of those concepts, their minds are blown. Like, wait, what?
Yeah. And I think here's the really cool thing that I've noticed, Ani, is that in almost all those trainings when I travel and teach, it's physical therapists, they actually genuinely want to believe and want to be able to work with people holistically, but they don't have the evidence to do so.
Okay.
That's really what I see. I don't see people being resistant to it. I see people actually looking for a reason they can grab onto that allows them to say, yes, like now I can do it. I've been given permission to
Hmm.
do it. That's really what I see.
Hmm.
So, one of the very first things I start every talk I travel with is I ask people in the room, I say, okay, raise your hand if you have a body. And, some people raise their hand, some people
Right.
don't because
Yeah.
not everybody's engaging.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they're like, yeah,
Sure.
we have a body. And then I say, okay, so who here has a mind? And people are like, oh. Like, well, I don't know. Maybe sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I always ask them, I say, if you raise your hand, you have a mind. How do you know? Tell me. Like, describe to me how you know you have a mind. Prove it to me. And I said, it doesn't matter what the answer is. And people just will give me all kinds of things. I think, I feel, I have emotions, whatever it is. And they're all great. And then I say, okay, so who in this room here or has some relationship with spirit? And everybody, not everybody, but most people raise their hands.
Do they?
And I say, how do you know?
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of like, oh, I don't know. I just feel it. I just know. I'm like, those
Uh-huh.
are great answers.
Yeah.
And some people, I get all kinds of answers, which is really fun. I
Yeah.
get all kinds of different answers. And I say, okay, here's the point, gang. If you raised your hand and said, yes, I have a body, yes, I have a mind, and yes, I have a spirit, do you realize you're living on three planes of experience right now? You're living on a mind plane, a body plane, a spirit plane, like right now. And I challenge you to let your body walk out the door and leave your mind and spirit here. And of course, people are like, oh my God, you're right, that we can't actually do that. So your patients are just the same way. Like your patients are living on three planes of existence just like you are. Everyone is. And so if as physical medicine professionals, we're focusing solely on just the body, we're only paying attention to one third of a person's whole life experience. And we expect their body part to heal if we're disregarding two-thirds of them. I said it actually doesn't make sense that would happen. And then we walk them through a whole kind of discussion and training around bioenergetics and our fascial tissue, really interconnected between the physical world and a person's energetic, mental, emotional world, and it clicks for people.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is physical therapists can have a tendency to be in the box kind of thinkers, in the box that they're in. And it's not necessarily that they don't want to think out of the box, but they need to have an awareness that makes sense to them and is to some degree supported
Exactly, because that's our
to be
tendency,
to
right?
be able to,
I
yeah.
need to be shown some level of validity that what you're telling me has some level of truth,
Sure.
right? But of course, the other interesting thing I mentioned to people is when we're talking about energetic vibration between two people and between like kind of like tuning forks work,
Yeah.
and we kind of do this little lesson around tuning forks. And it's like, have you ever seen you vibrate, you hit one, it starts vibrating, another one next to it starts vibrating without touching one another, and it looks like magic. So it's not really magic because there's a medium between the two that you can't see, which are molecules in invisible molecules in space. And if the molecules are vibrating and the other tuning fork comes into that vibrational environment, then it's going to start vibrating. So you're seeing the cause and the effect, but you're not seeing the medium in which it occurs. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And so I say, so who here believes that there's invisible oxygen molecules floating around right now? And everybody raises their hand. I said, isn't it interesting that oftentimes some things we don't see we do believe in, and some things we don't see we don't believe in?
Yeah, that's funny.
So why are we believing oxygen molecules? I don't see them. Do you see them?
Yeah.
But other things you don't.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
of our belief we've been taught, we've been trained what to believe,
Yeah.
and some things we've been told to take on faith
Yeah.
because it's something we don't see but we're supposed to believe in, and other things we've been told is quackery, but we still can't see that and we don't believe in it.
And it can be really confronting, especially when a person's going through their own personal process, because one of the conditioning things is about being seen as a quack or about believing in something that you can't see. And it can be very confronting to confront that belief system. I'm just reminded that we have a graduate who's a scientist.
Mhm.
And when she was going through one of her deepest and most profound transformations for herself, one of the beliefs that just popped up for her was like, this stuff can't be real. And here I am buying into it. And it was so fabulous to work with her in this moment because she's wearing one of those, their aura rings, right?
Yeah, O-ring, yeah, one of the metabolism rings. It kind of measures your
It measured.
biofields and stuff.
Yeah. And so she came to her own conclusion while having this like almost panic come over her about, oh my gosh, what am I doing believing in this crazy stuff? And she looked down and she saw her ring and she's like, it's not crazy. This ring tells me that it works and I see it
And she's
in
been tracking it.
data and
Yeah.
I've been tracking it and I've seen the data. And it was just like this amazing confluence of her transformation being met with the data to allow her to continue forward with that transformation. She's like never gone back
Yeah.
from it. It's been really phenomenal to watch her. It's just reminding me of that,
Yeah, yeah, and I love her. She's amazing because
need the
she
data.
she does such an amazing job of bringing together the idea of the things we can't see,
Yeah.
and then measuring them
And
in
measuring them.
some
Yeah.
some way. And she's actually on our team too.
Yeah.
She helps us measure stuff. So and we just love her. It's awesome. So let's kind of keep coming back to PT because I could ramble about the
Yeah.
evidence-based stuff all day. So what is it when we work with PTs, like what is the transition point for them? So the transition point for me to kind of start stepping into more a holistic way of thinking was a lot of that interdisciplinary kind of care. But the other was a transition thing for me was I remember working with clients with traumatic brain injury, and I remember the doctors looking at MRIs and saying, okay, so based on this person's MRI, this is the outcome they're going to have. Right? They're making prognoses. Like based on
Yes.
this MRI, this is the prognosis for this person, that person, that person, that person. And I noticed a lot of the time we were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought, huh, like if I see like that brain area, and one of the most profound things, I remember I had a patient, well, one of my long-term patients when I was at Craig. He was actually there when I was a student too. So I came back and he became my patient, which was cool. But I remember looking at his MRI for the first time. I was going to do a case study presentation for the staff on him. And I looked at his MRI and one of the hemispheres of his brain looked like it had been smudged off. Like it
Mm.
literally looked like the radiologist like spilled coffee on it or
Oh,
something and
wow.
like smudged it. And I said, "Oh, let me get another MRI and look at it." And it was the same thing, and the same thing, and the same thing. Literally half of his brain was gone.
Wow.
And and so I was like, "Oh my God!" So this is what's going to happen based on his brain.
Right.
Like this is what we're going to see.
Yeah.
And by over the years of working with him, he, got to the place where he was volunteering on a regular basis. He could get himself in and out and transfer and walk with a cane. And I remember the day he walked with the cane, it walked actually in the parallel bars for the first time, and the whole gym like got up and applauded
Yeah.
him as a young kid. It was an amazing journey arc of his recovery and where he's gone in his life. And so I realized, wait, so there's something more. And one of the things was his family had a very strong connection. They had a big family, they're five kids. They were all really connected,
Hmm.
all super supportive. They gathered around him. They had a lot of faith in that
Hmm.
family. They actually had a faith community that they were a part of. So, and his mom held like this space for him that I'm getting a little emotional about it, that he was going to like be able to walk again and return to his life at the church and what they were doing at the time. And she was like, I
Steadfast
remember
belief.
her being in meetings with the team and the doctors trying to break it to her.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, like that's not what's going to happen. And she was such a beautiful person too. So she wasn't like mean about it. But so I realized there's something more here. There's something else going on beyond just your brain controls your body. And so it broke a spell for me that I
Mm.
had to know more.
Yeah.
I had to know more. Like, what was healing really about? And it put me on this whole journey. And so there's the other kind of tipping point for me that made me want to kind of go into the whole idea of body mind medicine
Hmm.
and starting to understand those things. What I didn't really realize at the time was I was kind of going into that in kind of that coaching direction.
Right.
Right. So one thing I kind of want to talk about, Ani, is actually I was doing some research.
You?
Yeah, me and so when I teach, when I travel and teach and try to bring the idea to physical therapists that we can be more than we are, that we can get ourselves out of that box. Came
Mhm.
across a study and on non-specific low back pain. It was a systemic review of non-specific low back pain research. And here's one of the findings. One of the findings, I'm going to read it verbatim from the study from this on back pain. In health, interdisciplinary approaches describe the coordination of different health disciplines working together to optimize care delivery. Whereas, so interdisciplinary means like PT working with OT, working with speech therapists, working with neuropsychology, all working together, interdisciplinary, right? Intradisciplinary approaches describe single health disciplines blending skills within their own scope of practice with concepts, methods, or techniques borrowed from other disciplines.
I have not thought of that before.
Intradisciplinary.
That's interesting.
The amount of evidence is growing, suggesting that, in line with psychologically informed practice, exercise providers, mainly physical therapists, have the capacity to successfully incorporate psychological strategies
I love
into
this.
treatment for patients with musculoskeletal pain conditions.
I love this so much because so many people who find us say, I found you all, but I'm considering going back for a psychology degree. because there's something about the psychology.
Yes, exactly. I think PTs are finding I can't help this person get all the way to the finish line.
Yeah.
And honestly, most of the PTs who found their way to us, I think have come through either the chronic disease or chronic pain pathways.
I would have to
That those seem
agree.
to be the primary avenues.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, that's where somatic coaching could probably have the biggest impact, and physical therapy care is around
Chronic pain.
chronic issues,
Yeah.
right?
That
Like,
makes
not that
sense.
you can't have it not have some type of coaching impact around sports or health or something like that,
Sure.
but chronic issues, chronic behavioral
We're
issues,
talking about rewiring the subconscious
exactly,
mind. So, of
behavior patterns.
course, exactly. Of course, that has something to do with chronic issues.
Yeah,
Of course, with chronic issues, we need to look at our subconscious programming. It
exactly.
actually makes no sense to me that we wouldn't be looking at subconscious programming when we're talking about chronic issues.
Totally. And pain has really been the one that broke this open, because all the research in the last decade around chronic pain has really helped us to demystify the idea that it's, number one, solely a physical problem at all,
Yeah.
because it's never solely physical. It's always mental, emotionally, psychologically, energetically, behaviorally overlaid. That's very clear in the research now. We talk about biopsychosocial medicine. And so, as physical therapists, working especially in chronic conditions or chronic pain, who do not have some sort of biopsychosocial skill background,
Because you
are going to be ineffective.
because you
You
don't in
don't.
your education, right? I mean, that's one of the
Right.
things we were talking about with OT is we do have that in our educational
Yeah.
curriculum as an occupational therapist, but PTs don't.
PTs, as far as I understand to this point in time, there's
Right.
still no formal part other than maybe a 2 credit course somewhere that specifically dives into the interconnections between biopsychosocial functionality in the body and the biopsychosocial interventions that can actually be useful to help people, eliminate chronic pain.
That's wild. So, of course, it makes sense that a physical therapist would want to self educate when they graduate in these things because it's basically like there's no way you're going to really make a powerful effect, especially with chronic conditions, unless you do.
Yeah, totally. Like, we have a student in our level 2 training program right now, right?
Yeah.
The somatic fundamentals uh, trans
Transformation. Yeah.
transformations class, he's a PT who developed a pain clinic.
Yeah.
And like when he joined, I'm like giddy. I'm like, oh my God, yes.
I was
And
too.
he's got such great questions like during every class and office hours, like really pointed, meaningful questions. And one of the best things, he's already using it in the clinic. Like immediately, he like
Immediately
takes it and uses it immediately.
on really good stuff
It's
too. Like,
incredible,
yeah.
right? And he comes back, he's like, well, this happened.
Yeah.
And we're like, and he's like, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing emotional cross mapping for someone with physical pain. And like, they actually ended up having less pain after we did it. How did that happen? Sort
Yeah.
of thing. And like, yeah, so he's actually integrating it. So that's like super, super exciting. So it
Yeah.
seems to be like chronic disease and chronic pain as being the hallmark effectiveness for what we do with somatic coaching. Is for physical therapists, is like, is that a match? Heck yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like gong. Let's not just bing that one. Let's gong that one. That's totally for sure. Um, so interesting. Another just interesting way to think about body mind medicine for a moment is another thing I like to kind of talk about. So we're in a time in space in medicine where a lot of disciplines are trying to find a way to blend the physical and mental emotional,
Right.
right? Body mind. We're trying to like put the body mind back together. Not that
Yeah.
it was ever split or separate.
Yeah. 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 It's fun to watch how people are trying to do that too.
you know?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that in the 70s, probably somewhere in the 70s, that psychology professionals began to put body focused methods into their treatments,
Oh,
right?
right.
More
Sure.
somatic methods
Yeah.
into their treatments.
Yeah.
And because they noticed that when they added somatic practices into their psychological treatments, people got better faster.
Mm-hmm.
Their nervous systems became more stabilized.
Right.
They had better emotional management. They had better self-efficacy. They had less depression. They slept better. Like all the things that a lot of mental health professionals want to achieve with their clients
Right.
was aided by adding somatic practices in.
Yeah.
So psychology professionals, which primarily are working with, let's say, the mind, we'll
Yeah.
put that in air quotes, added in practices with the body,
Yeah.
and it kind of brought them to the middle of using body mind.
I think
right?
that's interesting because, like, nobody's going to be like, well, hang on a second, you can't do that. But in physical therapy, what's up with that?
Exactly,
Right?
right?
People are like, hang on a second, you're not a psychologist.
Exactly. Isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
Like it's okay for psychology professionals to add body practices
Okay,
in.
hang on a second, because this goes right back to the body mind split, Brian, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where we just decided, like, I'm going to take this part, and the church is like, we're going to take the spirit, and the doctors are going to take the body, and don't mess with my part, and I won't mess with your part,
Yeah, totally.
right?
Right. And so somebody broke that deal somewhere along the way.
But the
And
psychologist could totally be like, we're not doing physical therapy, we're just doing some movement
yeah,
strategies.
we're breath work, right? We're doing some breathing, we're
Exactly.
doing some mindful movement, we're doing something like that. And
Yeah,
there's some great people out there that done amazing things,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like all the MSBR and those kinds of things bring stuff to the middle. The mindfulness practices had a lot to do with that also, and that's what kind of happened in the 70s when a lot of Harvard psychology students went to India to study mindfulness, then brought that back to Harvard. And that had its own bumps in the road too, by the way. Like
I'm sure.
psychology, the schools did not want
Yeah.
any of that hoofy foofy stuff
That
happening.
happens every time with a new discipline. I'm
Yep.
thinking about when the woman who wrote the emotions book that we love so much,
Candace Pert.
Lisa
Oh,
Barrett,
Lisa Feldman Barrett.
Lisa
Yeah.
Feldman Barrett, and she talks about all of the pushback she got from her professional community.
Yeah.
And she's a psychologist.
Yep.
She got such a tremendous amount of pushback from the community because it's like, you're thinking in a new way.
Yeah,
You sit
exactly.
down.
You're gonna break 100 years
Exactly.
of framework or
Just
something.
sit down and stop talking about that stuff. And so people don't have a defense for it when it makes sense and the research supports it. So what other defense do you have besides saying, well, you're just woo woo?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And just kind of like
Like shaming, like
shaming it and
shaming or
judging it for
something.
somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So the psychology professionals, mental health professionals have been integrating body practices in for some time now. But physical medicine professionals, much to your point, Ani, have been really reticent to do so.
Mhm.
Like, oh, it's outside of our scope. We can't do it. It's not appropriate.
Breakers
But
and
listen
stuff.
what I just read from a meta-analysis, all right? There is growing evidence suggesting that in line with psychologically informed practice, somatic coaching, exercise providers, mainly physical therapists, have the capacity to successfully incorporate psychological strategies, somatic coaching, into treatment for patients with musculoskeletal pain conditions.
So, okay. So the point of this is to say, is physical therapy a match with somatic coaching?
Yes,
Yes, it
obviously.
is. And I think you and I both know that in order to actually move forward with that, it's going to take enough of us professionals to awaken ourselves to these
Hmm.
facts and to say, hey, I'm going to do something different in the system or out of the system. I'm going to start to utilize these things. And when we do, we may get some flack.
Yep.
I got tremendous amount of flack. I don't know if you
Got
did.
flacked.
So,
Yep.
okay. So, are you willing to take a stand because it's not just because it matters and not just because the patients, it's like, this is what's really happening.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to take enough of us. It reminds me of that Pixar movie that you probably didn't see about the bugs where all of the ants were like, this is a thing. We're tired of the grasshoppers. And all of the ants
Yeah.
needed to bind together.
Yeah.
It's like, it's going to take all of us rehab professionals to like link arms and say, this is real.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. Absolutely. And here's the other thing, for whatever flack that you receive, again, one of the things we love to just lean on here at the Somatic Coaching Academy is that we give people a tremendous amount of resources to be able to be successful with this.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that's what we do. We want to have your back. We want to have your back so you can create the things that you want to be creating in the world. And we've had some physical therapy graduates do some amazing
And
things.
we've helped a lot of people leave the system and start
Yep.
their own practices. If it, like, that's just,
That's
it happens.
mhm.
You might not want it. You might want to stay in the system. And people do. We actually have people who've stayed in the
Yeah,
system
totally.
too
Yeah,
and are
absolutely.
so happy because they're getting better results in their system job. That's totally fine. There's not a day in my life I'm not happy that I left the system for
Right.
me personally, but that's not everybody.
Yep.
And
And some people actually so for some people who want to leave the system and haven't figured out a way to do it because as a PT leaving the system, you have to have a way to differentiate yourself
Yeah.
from the work that's being done inside of the system
Yep.
because otherwise it's honestly it's too competitive as a individual provider of physical therapy services to compete with larger healthcare systems
Right.
if you're going copay for copay,
Totally.
or insurance for insurance. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
So PTs have to have a way to differentiate themselves, and one of the things that we excel at is helping PTs create cash-based practices because they're incorporating somatic coaching into what they're doing,
Yeah.
and it's like amazing. We love doing that so much.
Yeah. And they can do the PT and they can do the coaching. And
Yep.
yeah, you differentiate yourself. You also, a lot of people leaving the system don't know how to be business owners. And we know how to help you do that.
Yep,
And we
totally.
do
100%.
for all of
100%.
the programs.
So whether you are a PT who brings somatic coaching in and you start your own practice or you stay inside of a healthcare system, either way, no judgment on that. One of the things you'll need to recognize as a PT, and you've probably recognized this, is have you ever like had someone come to you because something happened? You do your physical therapy or rehab with them. You do really great rehab, and then you send them home for the week for their exercise to do their exercise program. They come back the next week and they're right in the same place they were the week previously because why? They did not change their behavior.
Right.
They did not change their behavior. And you get so frustrated because you're like, if you would just change your behavior, your knee would get better, your hip would get better, you'd have less pain, you'd have less inflammation, you'd sleep better if you just would change your behavior. I'm doing all I can do on my side, but you're not changing your behavior on your side. So you're putting yourself back in the same place every single time.
It's so
How
frustrating.
frustrating is that as a rehab
As a
professional?
practitioner, it's so frustrating. And it also shows up when people come back with different stuff or the same issue. So like they get a little bit better, but then they come back,
Yep.
right? The repeat customers
Yeah,
kind of
exactly,
thing.
exactly. So why is somatic coaching a match for physical therapists is
Bec-
because you're not just doing the rehab, you're actually helping people change their behavior. And when they change their behavior, then all of a sudden they get better. And then you're like, oh my God, we did it. We did that together.
Mhm.
Right. So that's one of the most why is it a match? Bing. Like that's one. Because I think as a PT, if you're really interested in helping people move beyond where they are, and one of my mantras as a PT, I would be very honest with this when people come in to see me. I'd say, hey, listen, you're coming in for a back pain or a neck issue or whatever it is. My goal for you, I'd ask what their goals were. They tell me their goals. And I say, my goals for you is that you never have to come back and see me for this problem again.
Mhm.
That's my goal. You come
Mhm.
back to me for another problem, and if this does occur again, that's fine. But my goal is that we're going to eliminate the root cause of whatever it is of you going on.
Yeah.
And most people are like, wow, okay, that's aspirational. But I tell you what,
Seriously.
I actually achieved that more often than most people would have thought that we did
Absolutely.
because that was our goal.
Yeah.
And we did it through behavior change. And
Yeah.
the behavior change was a function of the coaching.
Similarly for me, when people would come in, I would say, this is a partnership and you're going to actually change your behavior. Like if you're not willing to meet me in partnership, you're not my ideal client. You can go see somebody else who's going to like rub you or something.
Yep.
But we are going to partner together, which is what coaches do,
Yeah. Yep.
to support your growth and evolution beyond where you've been before,
Yep.
which is a coaching thing.
Yeah, totally, totally. So let's just kind of run back down through this thing. Why is it a match as a physical therapist and somatic coaching?
Sure.
Here's the
I'm just so
rundown.
excited.
Number
This is
one,
great.
because if you want to start your own cash-based practice, it's a differentiator for you outside of the medical system, and people do pay for that. Number two, if whether you're inside outside the system, it doesn't matter. If you're interested in being the kind of PT that gets people past where most people think they can go, do behavior change with people and move people in a more empowered place in a partnership way, like check, bing. That's definitely a yes to in terms of helping someone with behavior change. The last match that I would just kind of talk about really quickly also is circling all the way back to what we circled at or talked about at the beginning of this one today, where around the evidence base,
Oh,
especially around energy medicine.
oh yeah.
Right, there's a growing evidence base. If you use evidence to widen your perspective rather than narrow it, then you'll widen your perspective as a rehab professional and see that our bodies are in fact energy, subatomic particles spinning, whirring, our DNA vibrates. Like there's all really good science to show that. But big deal. Big deal. Now, somatic coaches really well-trained somatic coaches know how to use that knowledge to apply it to programs, to client and patient programs. So when you understand how to actually apply energy medicine techniques and also stress management techniques, because we know stress is one of the primary, actually talk to Dr. Ellen Langer, who's done, mind-body studies for over 45 years now or something. I was just listening to a podcast from her. She says that stress in her, after 45 years of doing research, a career of mind-body medicine, she says that stress is by far the number one single most prevalent indicator of chronic disease, illness, issues.
There you go.
Unbalanced stress. So, which is another reason why I kind of got into this whole thing, my own story. But here's the thing. So as a PT, that checks two more boxes for you. If you want to be able to go to the root cause of chronic disease, chronic illness, if you're not addressing a person's unmanaged autonomic nervous system issues, AKA stress, you're going to be very difficult to make a big change in their life or any change in their life at all.
Autonomic nervous system is the body.
Yep, is the body, exactly. So hopefully that makes sense. And like checking all the boxes, our physical therapist and somatic coaching, a match.
Check.
Bing.
Bing.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that, Brian. This is, you always bring some great research and stuff. I love the research you found on this, and it caused me to think differently about myself and, this different interdisciplinary and intradisciplinary. Really, really cool podcast. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, you got it
so much.
Thanks for let me run and ramble.
Yeah. Oh, you weren't ramble. You were right on it on this. Thank you so much. And if you're listening and this is interesting to you, we're so excited because obviously we're really passionate about the fact that the body mind is not broken. It's actually just fine. We just aren't really aware of it. So thanks for listening in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that this conversation will help you improve your practice and change the way you think about your work, your clients, and yourself.
Continue your exploration of trauma-sensitive somatic coaching by listening to more podcast episodes at somaticcoachingacademy.com. You could be the trusted guide that people turn to help them with their most challenging situations and to reach their most precious goals. Thank you for joining us.
We'll see you next time.